This episode of the FireDawg Podcast is supported by AOS Services, the one-stop shop for firefighting equipment compliance built for the DoD. At AOS Services, they help military fire departments stay mission-ready with customized programs that bundle everything from SCBAs and compressors to hoses, ladders, PPE care, rescue gear, and more. Their teams work worldwide, so whether you're stateside or overseas, they've got you covered. For all your firefighting equipment compliance needs, visit aosservicesinc.com to learn more. This episode of the FireDawg Podcast is supported by Roll Call Coins. Founded by a 24-year Air Force firefighter veteran, they understand that a coin represents more than just an event. It represents a story. Using 3D modeling and custom textures, Roll Call has moved beyond generic designs to create premium, standout coins. Whether you're honoring a department or branding a business, they make the process effortless. Start your design today at rollcallcoins.com and let your coin stand out in the stack.
This is the FireDawg Podcast.
The views and opinions presented on today's episode are those of the speaker and do not necessarily represent the views of the Department of Defense or the United States Air Force.
Welcome, my name is Matt Wilson, and thank you for listening to episode 62 of the FireDawg Podcast. In today's episode, I'm joined by a returning guest and someone with an extraordinary career spanning both the military and civilian fire service, Chief Master Sergeant retired Peter Webb. Many of you remember Chief Webb from episode 35, where we talked about his journey from the Army to the Air Force Reserves, his role as a command chief in the 919th Special Operations Wing, his service as a Battalion Chief in Dothan, Alabama, and his firsthand account of a mayday where he served as incident commander. Since that episode, Chief Webb has retired from the Air Force after more than 32 years of service and has continued his leadership in the civilian fire service. Today, we're going to reflect on the arc of his career, the leadership lessons he's learned along the way, the most impactful moments of his service, and a topic many of us face at some point in our careers: what to do when you don't get the job you applied for in the position that you really wanted. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the FireDawg Podcast, Chief Pete Webb. Chief, good morning to you. Great to have you on.
Good morning. How are you doing?
I am doing great, sir. I'm affected by this winter storm we have rolling through, so contending with that. Texas doesn't know how to handle that kind of stuff, as I'm sure it's the same in Alabama.
yeah, pretty much. In the northern part of the state, they've got some infrastructure, but where I live at, we had a snowstorm last year where we got like 6 inches of snow, and we got one sanding truck from the state to come down and assist us. So that, fortunately, it wasn't. The problem was normally it melts here, but last year it did. We had snow for 2 days on the ground, and people driving turned to ice. So that was the tough part as far as getting people to stay off the roads. But no major incidents. Had one working fire in the middle of it, but it all played out. But yeah, I was talking to somebody in Texas, and he was flying out to Boston yesterday, and he goes, "I'd rather be snowed in Boston than Texas because they're losing their mind." I said, "Okay." So
I think people, I lived in the North for a time. People in the North don't understand that the infrastructure isn't built for this kind of weather. Maybe one snow that melts in the daytime, but when you're talking about sustained cold and wet, icy, snowy conditions, I don't think anybody can handle ice, heavy ice conditions, no matter where you are in the world. You know what I mean? So when that stuff's hanging on electrical lines and everything else, ice and that stuff doesn't mix well.
Yeah, the message. Of course, I get the messages from across the state, from Alabama EMA, and we're monitoring because if we have to go up and support. But one statistic I saw: a 1/4 inch of ice breaks power lines. A 1/2 inch of ice shuts down power for days because they have to rebuild, because the power lines just don't break in one area. If I remember correctly, they can break in several sections in a span, and sometimes they can reconnect. Well, in that they have to replace all the lines, and of course, icy conditions, and we put out our messages here. I know tomorrow it's supposed to drop 50 degrees. We got the cold front will come through. We'll be in the 70s, and it's supposed to drop down to the high 20s. So, okay, yeah, we stay inside, but as soon as you have a fire and you got that much cold, that water's going to freeze someplace. And we don't have chains. We're not sanding or salting or anything like that. So it turns into something interesting.
Exactly. Well, I didn't plan to talk about winter storms in preparation with you this morning, but hey, I think it's relevant. It's a fire service podcast. You got to talk about how we prepare, from the public safety perspective to do that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting to me every time one of these natural disasters kind of rolls through, and I'm intrigued, I guess, naturally as a firefighter, and how communities prepare for something like this, and really like just the logistical scale of it is impressive to me. Like how many millions of people are affected by it, and what it does to the infrastructure, and how much we take that infrastructure for granted.
Even with fire departments, if you're a military firefighter, you don't have to technically worry about overtime. On the civilian side of the house, and we have civilian firefighters in the federal service. I get that, but when do you bring them in? Do you bring them in too early and they sit around and not do anything because you can't place them? But as soon as you don't bring them in early, now they can't get in, so you're going to have overtime on the other end because people can't go home yet.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point.
it's always a challenge. When the snowstorm came in last week, I was talking to the fire chief, and I was like, I don't want to not do anything, but as soon as we don't do anything, you know what happens. So, but we were lucky. We got about, I don't know, about 1.5 inches, 2 inches yesterday, last weekend, but it never stuck to the roads. It only stuck to grass on top of buildings. So it was kind of pretty. We didn't have any impacts, didn't have to shut down any roads, and it melted within 6 hours. So it was quite different than last January.
Yeah, a lot of complexities that you don't think about really until the moment comes, and then you start thinking about it, and you're like, oh man,
Well,
this is going to cost us a little bit more money.
Yeah, it's going to tie into, it ties back, and it's funny, incident management will tie back into administrative or professional development as well, because you have to be proactive. You don't, and then you have to prioritize too at the same time. Where do I put my effort? Where do I aim my effort? Is it a jack of all trades type thing, or do I laser sharp focus? Or like my career, I got the best of both worlds. I got to be a military firefighter. I got to be a civilian firefighter, and both of those careers supported my success. Exposed me to a lot. It prevented me from doing certain things too when I wanted to do things, and which maybe we'll talk about here in the next 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, absolutely, Chief. And for those who don't know Chief Pete Webb, he was on episode 35 with us, correct, sir?
I had to go back and look. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I did as well. I didn't re-listen to it, but I do remember the conversation. So we highlighted the fact that you were a reserve command chief, which you are now retired from, correct?
Been retired 3 years.
Okay, cool. Congratulations on that. And you're
Thank
a deputy fire chief in Dothan, Alabama, right?
Yeah, I was promoted. So since the last episode, I got promoted during my retirement ceremony. My civilian boss, I knew I was being promoted, but he actually presented the boss and had me not necessarily do an oath. We do a declaration. Hey, we accept the responsibilities, and we always do that publicly. Well, we did it at Eglin Air Force Base that day. But yes, the deputy fire chief over training and development. Been doing that for 3.5 years now. Right, it's already been 3.5 years in that position.
Isn't it crazy how time flies? Even since we last spoke, Chris Boykley had wanted to bring you on because you were involved in FRAS a little bit because you had commanded a mayday at some point in your career in Dothan, Alabama, and you come and you speak about that event and kind of how you handled it and what happened, correct?
Yes, and the big thing about that is while the students in FRAS, they're learning how to survive, they're learning how to get the best of their air pack and their skills and rely on their buddy. I wanted to talk about the command aspect of what's going on the outside, because it's very chaotic inside, but it's just chaotic outside. Fortunately, my mayday was turned around really quick, like 45 seconds to a minute. We had a firefighter fall through one leg fell through a floor. They were able to pull him out, get him out, and move on for that. But there's a lot of things that go in with that incident commander,
Right.
dealing with what they do. And, there's a lot of great information out here about how to manage mayday, how to be prepared for a mayday. Whether you follow Nick Martin, whether you follow Blue Card, or you do your own training. That's the key. Again, we come back to the storm prep, which your incident prep. Are you training? Are you getting the sets of reps in, et cetera?
It's such an important element to everything incident command. It's one that I find a lot of interest in personally, just because of the complexity of the logistics and the planning aspect of it. It's, I don't want to say just as important. I would say all elements of an emergency response are important, but it's an important piece, and that's one that I take interest in. So if you're interested in listening about that commanding the mayday, go back to episode 35, listen to Chief Pete Webb talk about that. Today we're going to get into something a little bit different, but first I want to introduce you, Chief, again. For those who haven't listened to episode 35, who are you? How long did you spend in the Air Force? Where did you serve your time in the Air Force? And where are you currently?
Okay. So Pete Webb, as we already said, currently a deputy fire chief for Dothan, Alabama, which is the southeast portion of the state. We're opposite of Mobile. A lot of people think we're Mobile, but we're closer to Florida and Georgia. So been with Dothan right at, I think March is my anniversary month. So I'm going to hit 29 years in March here. I retired out of the Air Force in October of 22. That was a total of 32 years. In that 32 years, 8 of that was Army, reserve and active duty. I did it backwards. I went reserve, then active duty, and then I jumped in the Air Force Reserve, where the majority of my career was at the 919 Special Operations Wing at Eglin. And so while they're deployed to Al Dhafra after 9/11, was activated at Herbert Field for a year. And then my last deployment, which we're talking about time, was 10 years ago. I came home 10 years ago this weekend, I think, was in Jordan. So did that. I was the deployed fire chief there. And then I did some time at 10th Air Force as the program manager, about 18 months. And I boarded and was selected to be the command chief back at the 919th. So I only about 18 months minus deployments was I not at Duke Field with the 919th. And it's the difference between reserve and active duty. You normally stay in the same place. You can move around, you can do some other things, but one of the selling stories, hey, you get to serve quote unquote locally. Well, that's changed over the years, over the last 36 years. Rules for reservists have changed. It used to be you had to live within 150 miles of the base. Then they changed that. Heck, I was drilling out of Fort Worth for 18 months, so I had to fly over to Dallas. But so other than that, that's the background. Did 8 years in the Army, 24 in the Air Force, retired as a command chief. That's an interesting story how I got there, I think, because I didn't do any squadron or group time as a SEL. I went right from a flight up to command chief, and there's a story behind that. But education-wise, I've got my master's. I am an EFO grad. That was way back in 2010. And, one of the things I'll talk about when you are, recovering from a career if it's a setback or a speed bump, I am a doctoral student now. I'm in my second term at Columbia Southern University. It's been 15 years since I've written in academia, and I'm a little behind, but it's a good thing because it's always about lifelong learning. It's always about growing and going from there. So that's me in a nutshell. I'm married. My son is now a firefighter with Dothan as well. That's a change since the last one. He's been there about 2 years. That adds an interesting thing to a career, and but it's been a good thing. It's kind of funny because if his crew's getting in trouble, I won't get butt chief, I'll get butt dad, so it's kind of funny with the humor and all that. But no, I, just wanted to follow back up. I don't get to listen to your podcast or any podcast. When I used to drive to Eglin, it was about 100 miles. All my podcast listening was done while I'm driving. Well, now that I'm local, I hope to travel so I can listen to a podcast because that's the only time I get to really focus in on them. But, I listened to Chris LaPointe. Was it Chris LaPointe? A couple episodes ago, last episode, Laparty. Listen to his story a little bit. Didn't get the whole thing, but I wanted to listen to it because I felt it tied into what I wanted to talk about a little bit today as well.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning as the host in the direction of let's highlight more of the individual, and we don't highlight so much programmatic things, but I just love, and I find it so intriguing, individual stories and career trajectories and, what have you gone through? What have you learned along the way? And that's kind of what I'm try to capture with Chris, and what I'm going to also, try to capture with you. Although we did have you on in 35, and so that somebody doesn't have to go back, they can listen to this one and kind of get and some things have happened since the last time we spoke with you too. So
it's been 4 years, 4 years.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that this
4.5, something like that. Yeah,
chugging along for that long.
Mm-hmm.
But command chief, that is an impressive achievement, and from flight to wing. And I know the reserves are different than active duty, but it's still something. It's a testament, I think, probably to your leadership ability, and I think it's a testament probably to how the fire service has contributed to your leadership ability. Wouldn't you say?
Well, it's a team effort. I mean, one of the things I highlighted when I retired was, and I'm going to say this is a joke, it takes a village. If you think you're doing everything alone, there's people working for you behind your back. There's people working in front of you, people working beside you. It takes a village. But I spin that as a joke, is that I'm also the village idiot and everybody's looking for me. But I would not have made I would not have made fire chief if it wasn't for a village, or chief master sergeant, if there wasn't a village of people mentoring, growing me, pushing me in the direction when I didn't want to go. Um, and it's, again, I come back to both careers, and it was on both sides of the house. And you'd also get the frustrating parts. Oh, you're on military this weekend again. You're never here when I need you to be here. Some of that was joking. Some of that was true, because it does get frustrating. But, one of the things you put on your outline last night when we were talking was, what are your mentors? My mentors are my village. My village is huge. I mean, it goes all the way down to an airman teaching me. I had a lieutenant in the National Guard in my last recruit school graduation, or second to last group graduation. She silenced me. One of our recruits wants you a damn good firefighter, but she got a joke on me during the graduation ceremony. And I said, that's the first I got a lieutenant that picked on me in a guard, in a military format. But no, the big thing's the village. I mean, there's so many. Yeah, we can talk about how I acted for 6 months as command chief, um, but I went right to the group SELs. I said, "What are you guys doing? Why are you making me do it?" And it was purposeful. They they didn't want to do it. They didn't want the responsibility. But the other part is they were also looking down the road, because they were towards the end of their careers. And so if it wasn't for a couple of command chiefs, 3 command chiefs, and 3 group SELs, I would have never discovered how much I would have enjoyed being a command chief. And that's with everything, the good, the bad, and all that.
I love that point about being mentored by people subordinate of you. And I use subordinate in the best way possible.
Right, right, yep.
Below you in the hierarchy. But
Mm-hmm.
and it's so true. And I think the point really worth taking away there is that if you are subordinate, and I think we're all subordinate in some regard.
Everybody has a boss.
Understand the influence that you could potentially have on people, right?
Uh-huh.
And you can be a subordinate leader. I've heard it talked about a lot. Just through your actions, through how you conduct yourself day to day, through how you speak, through how much you prepare and train and learn, you can be a leader no matter where you are, and you can influence the people above you. So I really love that point.
And it comes back to follower-ship. And where I learned about follower-ship in 1989, while I was at tech school. Of course, I was in the Army, so it was advanced individual training at Chanute Air Force Base. And it was a Saturday morning training. We were talking about leadership in the Army, and they had the be, no, do attributes. And it's, be dedicated. But the thing that always stuck out was followership. And, just being a follower. I'm not saying you just be a follower. You're not taking initiative. You're not taking charge of things. Followership is, your boss is about to have to do something, and you're one step ahead, and you're trying to take care of that. So that boss, it opens it up. So that boss, supervisor, has more opportunity to handle other things, and it's building trust. If you're being proactive, you're helping the mission, you're helping the individual get to whatever that mission is, whatever that individual's doing. But you don't have to be supervised. You're not going to be micromanaged if you're practicing good followership. And it's active participation. What comes out, and it's being proactive.
Yeah, what an excellent point. And it's funny that you bring that up, because we received some messages on, hey, we love that you talk about this, but could you talk about this? And one of those things is followership. And I think for the younger crowd out there, there is an appetite to hear about followership versus leadership. And I love that person messaged us that, and I love that you're bringing it up, because I think it's such an important and not talked about enough topic. How do you be a good follower? Let's not talk about leader, but let's talk about followership. And really, I think that they're kind of one and the same. Like I had mentioned, you could lead from the bottom, and that's understanding and anticipating the needs of your leader, your organization, doing the things that you're supposed to do before somebody has to tell you to do it.
Yep.
Those kind of knowing what you're supposed to do in regard to standing operating procedures or whatever the case. There's just so much that goes into being a good follower. And I think that actually makes you a good leader eventually down the line when you do get promoted.
Yes. And it's not just tied to the military either. It's tied across the board. Some people might say, "Oh, you're just kiss and tail." No, it's not. It's understanding that.
As a good member of the team, right? A
Yeah,
helpful member of the
it's
team.
teamwork. I mean, it comes down in teamwork. My civilian job, we have 4 areas that you can be in our evaluation project. You can be a role model, Firewall 5. When it comes to mission and all that. But if you're not a good team player, you're not going to get beyond a medium range evaluation, because we know firefighting is a team effort. Well, doing the stuff back in the station, the non-emergency response stuff, is teamwork as well. Is your truck checked off? Does your station look clean? Is your uniform squared away? There's a lot of stuff about uniforms, morale t-shirts, company t-shirts, and they're good. But if you're not following the basic uniform guidance for your, if you will, your normal uniform, why should we allow you to wear a morale uniform, a t-shirt or something like? They're important. There's a lot of unit pride. I get that, company pride. But if we're not following the basics, I think it was not Eisenhower, but Patton. And I'm going to paraphrase his quote: "If you can't enforce a uniform standard, how can you enforce somebody having to die taking the hill?" And that's very paraphrased, but Patton was huge on uniform, even in the combat area.
Yes.
But it was
if you
just
can't do the small thing right,
there you go.
How do we expect you to do the big things right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
I love that point. Well, 30-plus year career, both Air Force and civilian side, there's a whole lot there, and we've already kind of started talking about it a little bit. You'd brought up followership in our conversation prior to signing on this morning. You brought up character, integrity. There's so much there that I'd like to get into.
Okay.
So let's just dive into it. Yeah, biggest kind of those leadership lessons that you want to highlight from your 30-plus years.
So, character, we already talked about followership quite a bit. So character, so my previous boss, my fire chief, Chief Williams, I worked for him directly. I was thinking about this morning. Until yesterday, with my evaluation, I've had the same supervisor prior to that for approximately 20 years, if not 21 years. So I got a brand new evaluation process. I got to figure that one out. Not bad, not difficult. It's different. But one of the things he told me many years ago, and I've never forgotten, is character. You will see a person's character when they do not get something they wanted or were working for. Now, that does not mean you don't get to feel disappointed. Does not mean you have a mourning period, if you will. But it's how you bounce back, how you pivot. You're going to have to, you got to get back into the mission, or do you want to quit? I mean, do you feel you've achieved, you've peaked and you want to go through there? But you'll understand somebody's character, how they act, and how they act towards the person that got what you wanted, received what you wanted, how they act with their peers, how they act for their bosses. Granted, it's not easy not getting it, but it sets you up, and it ties back to followership. Okay, I didn't get what I wanted. One, what did I do not to get it? Was it something wrong? Was I not broad enough in my skills? Was I just tunnel vision on just being a firefighter? When you get to the fire chief position, in my city, it's appointed. City manager selects, and then it's voted on by the city commission. So I was talking to a previous commander I used to work for, and he was asking about the process. And I said, well, sir, it's just like when you went to become a general, Congress has to approve you being a general. Well, it's the same thing at the local level, and every fire department's different. It's an appointment. You could get selected, and then the local governing party says, no, we're not going to vote you in. Now, that didn't happen to me, which is what started me reaching out to you. But you have to be prepared. How are you going to focus? What's your character? Please understand, you have the mourning period. You can be disappointed. I can tell you a story. When I finally came home after I was told no, I had to listen to my wife. She was mad. She was madder than I was. But all in good thing. But
right. Well, she cares about you, and she thinks that you're the best, right? So
yeah, and so, but you still you got to focus on the mission, and that mission includes taking care of your people, includes setting the proper example for you people. I have a training division. I have the biggest training division my department's ever had, with 7 people in it. And, you're setting an example, because guess what? They're building the next generation of firefighters. And if you set that wrong example outside your mourning period, et cetera, they're going to remember that, and that could reflect in their teaching to the next generation of firefighters for the department. So it was, that character stands out because you got to be humble. You have to know humility. There's that saying in the fire service, you're either humble or you're going to be humbled. I don't think that was me, because I had a backup plan for, okay, if I don't get this, what's next? And I think tying down into my outline, that gets tied in, where are you at in your career, your point of view in your career at that time? Do I want to stay? Do I want to retire? Do I want to transition out? Or is there another step? And you go, oh, you can go to another department. You're right, I can, but I can't go too far because I've got a grandchild now. My wife works here and she's got a lot of work she has to do here. So, that option's not there where I'm at in my life, in my career. So that's where the character comes in, and you got to be able to recover. You got to be able to pivot quickly and seek solutions. I'll tell you what, after I was not selected, and I know I'm getting ahead, but
That's okay.
the day after, I did my normal Friday afternoon thing at a local watering hole, and there was the city manager who didn't pick me, and we had a beer together. And, the old outgoing boss was there, and I wasn't going to bring it up. I said, we move, hey, we still got to put out fires. We still got to respond to Mrs. Smith and go from there.
Yeah. That's a tough pill to swallow. And I love that you're talking about it, being candid about it. And there's a couple points I want to highlight. There's a lot that we could unpack there and that I would love to, but there's a couple things that I would like to hit on. And with your tenure and how much experience that you have in both, the civilian and the military side, the one thing that's not really talked about that I think is important to talk about is your likability. And you had mentioned, you had talked to the general about being appointed to that position. And when you get up to these executive level positions, there's an element, of course, your resume is important, what you have accomplished in your career up to that point, your professional career, and the kind of education, all those different things, all those variabilities are important, and they contribute to your promotion potential. But there's an element of likability too. The city manager or the hiring official has to like you, or because there has to be a good working relationship there, right? You have to be kind of on a similar wavelength. Can you talk to us about that likability and how, I guess, without kissing butt, right? How do we become likable for those people?
So I haven't even framed how to think about that, so I'm gonna have to work my way through this.
That's okay. Yeah, I'm kind of putting it on the spot.
No, that's okay. Well, this is good stuff because it makes us think and we grow. I think the key is being professional, and it depends on where you're at in your career. My military career, my reserve career, there was a lot I was doing and it pulled me away from the city. So maybe I'm not making all the events because at some time I got to spend time with my family.
Right.
And I think you did an episode where you were talking about
work-life balance.
Yeah, the work-life balance, but it's also making sure, hey, it's not just about firefighting. It's not just about emergency response. When you start climbing the ladder on the military side, it's the same thing. If I go up to the mission support group, it's not just about fire and CE and EOD. It's also about, the force support, FSFs. It's about what's going on with comm. And you have to be brought, and you have to get into those things, and you have to get a little bit in the weeds because fire protection. One of the toughest things for me as a command chief, and I learned this from another command chief that was a fire chief prior, was you can't go visit your boys and your gals in the fire department all the time because it's going to look like you're just focused on one thing. So I say that getting into the city, it's the same thing. What's going on? What are the impacts to your fire department that you have to educate? You have to be out in the public. You have to talk to maintenance. Good Lord knows how much we deal with maintenance issues with fire trucks. You have to, you got to be talking to your personnel department, whether it's FSS or A1, whatever you want to call it. But there's reasons why they maintain the rules they maintain because, one, they're trying to take care of everybody, the human aspect, the human resource aspect, but there's also federal laws out there we have to follow. So you have to have that. The likability is putting your face out there and meeting and greeting people and understanding what their mission is. You might not like them. You might not want to be able to go have a beer with them, but you still have to meet with them. So it's not just a um, subject matter expert. It's the broad range of how do you deal with people, how do you deal with customer service, but it's the internal stakeholders and it's the external stakeholders. Um, you know, I've been that young firefighter full of vinegar and other stuff, and probably opened my mouth one too many times. But I also, I'm not just going to be a yes man either. So what's that balance? You know, you've got to, you know, I had a command chief once tell me, one of my mentors, Chief Mike Lasudas, K2, he said, you always have 3 but sirs or 3 but ma'ams. You know, you're in the closed door, something's coming out, they want to do something, but sir, have you thought of no? But sir, at the 3rd time, the door opens up and now you're going to be on the same sheet of music. You've done that defense. Well, a lot of people don't see that defense and think, oh, you just caved. No, you haven't been sitting in my office, going through it or going back and forth, or you don't know what the other environmental issues are because there's so many things. When you get to those, as you said, executive level, there's a lot playing than just whether engine 2 beat you to the fire than engine 1. You know, it's not that. It's, hey, we got maintenance issues, and you know there are other apparatus in the sea that costs more than fire trucks. We don't like to admit that, but there are other stuff that's out there. So you have to be that. It's a team player, and it gets into that. So the likability is getting yourself exposed and meeting those other people, and you know it's a 2-way street too. They need to be able to talk to you and come to you and understand your issues, and the only way you can do that, you know, you get into communication.
Yeah, a lot there, and I know I put you on the spot there, but I think it's an important point to think about and consider, right? When you don't get selected. So when you're, and again, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but if you're not getting what you want in an organization, let's just say that maybe it's not even promotion, maybe that's just nobody's listening to you, nobody's taking your advice on the hose load on the engine or whatever. It's your likability is an important element. And I think that the foundation of it is how you treat other people and the relationships that you build and foster across time. And it's not always about caving, like you said. It's also not about getting your way every time. You know, there's got to be a healthy balance because this is a collaborative effort. This is a team organization. This isn't an individual organization. So you may not see and understand those variabilities that are executive level, or you may not understand it from somebody else's perspective. So you have to understand that you could be wrong. And so,
how many of us want to admit when they're wrong?
And it's really hard to do. And ego is a powerful thing and a dangerous thing. But if you can have some self-awareness and say, I could be wrong here. I'm going to say my point. I'm going to say my piece because I believe strongly in this, but let me also hear out other perspectives too.
Right.
And that goes for leaders, that goes for peers, that goes for subordinates. You're listening to everybody. You're taking in all of it. Now, of course, not an emergency, right? And not in emergency situations all the time. Yeah, you want to consider inputs on emergency, but if we're talking about someone's life hanging in the balance and we need to make a decision now, you know, that's a different circumstance, and that's not what we're talking about, you know, kind of day-to-day operational.
Well, it's different leadership styles at different moments.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, you see that in military operations, you see it on fireground operations. There's a time where we can cuss and discuss, hey, we're going to do training. That's why you do training. That's why you have tabletop discussions. Well, what about this, you know? But when it gets to you're on scene, you make that decision. It still might be a wrong decision, but if you sit there and hem and haw too long, that's worse than saying, hey, go do this. Because if at least you do the wrong thing, you're going to figure it out and go, okay, we need to fall back, punt, and come up with plan B and plan C. And two other things I want to, that you talked about with likability. Likability is probably more so trust. You're building trust. They don't necessarily have to like you, but they you know, you do got to earn their trust. And then the other thing,
that's a much better word to use, certainly.
And then the other thing is leadership is a verb and leadership is a noun. You know, we often say in the military, what leadership has said, well, that's the noun version of, that's the position. But the verb position is doing what you just talked about, getting out, talking to people, trying stuff, listening to people. That's the verb of leadership or being a leader, is it's the action. You know, it's action take. There is times where leadership has said, It's one of those important things that, hey, we got to do what leadership told us to do. But the other thing is now you got to go back and sell it. And now you're doing the verb portion of it. And sometimes that's hard to do when you don't really agree with it. And that's here comes your character. And now let's roll into integrity, which was our first core value. But integrity is a two-way street. And, I said in my interview, when I closed out my interview, I said, hey, I'm going to be here for the transition, because we knew this year was going to be a huge transition in my department. You got a fire chief exiting after being the fire chief for 19 years. We had a new city commission. We had a pile of construction projects that are ongoing downtown, which is pulling money, but it's a long-term investment playing that game. We got a very young department. 50% of the department is under 5 years experience. And so we knew this was going. We swapped budget process. Normally we're a 2-year budget. We only went to a 1-year budget to fix some things down the road. We're going to do 1 year temporarily, then go to 2 year. All that added in. So 2026 for the Dothan Fire Department is a transition period, and that was the mentality I went into it. So the integrity was, well, no matter who's selected for fire chief, there was 3 of us, and we all had the same chance to get there. Was next year's transition, I'll be here for the transition, and then, make that through. So the team effort, I said there. So if I said that at closing out my interview, my responsibility was I had to hold to that when I got told I didn't get the position. And now I got to show it, because, words are words, actions are more impactful, and, then learn from it. So that's where the integrity comes in. But my first meeting with the new fire chief, was he understood that at any time I can retire. He said at any time, or something came along, like maybe a teaching opportunity, or maybe another fire department came over. He understood that, and he didn't describe it this way, but my time is limited to a point where if something comes along, he's got to be prepared for me to roll out. Part of that transition is, okay, well, what are we doing for career succession? Who are we going to bring up into the levels and all that? So the mission focus, and I believe I was put there for that reason, is I guess I'm the transition guy for this area. So now I got integrity. So the integrity was returning back to me. Hey, if something comes along, don't you dare hold yourself back, Chief. Go ahead and grasp it, and I'll support you. So I think there's where the strong team thing grew. Was the integrity's two-way. I owe integrity to what I say, but the integrity has to come back from the organization, whatever it is, and that person as well.
Yeah, great points, Chief. And you brought up ego as well. And I love talking about ego and how, I don't know, just how it impacts you as an individual and how it impacts the team dynamic. So, and you talked about Brunacini, and I don't remember, I see that you've brought him up once before, talking about Mr. and Mrs. Smith, so I could see that you're a student of Alan Brunacini. What did he talk about with ego?
I mean, his saying was, egos eat brains. Now, as firefighters, being whether you're military fire, civilian firefighter, I want aggressive. I want some firefighters with cockiness, because I think that goes along with the job. One of the things I learned as a paramedic is dose is the poison. You can have too much ego, and it's going to hurt you. You don't have enough, it's going to hurt you. You gotta figure out what that is. But too much of anything is bad for you. Too much water, even too much oxygen, can kill you. So that's where it goes in there, is what he was saying. And this was part of, if I remember the story correctly, when they were building incident command, a lot of times there was no incident command because we had to wait for a chief officer to get there. And it was all about the rank. It wasn't about the position of doing the stuff at the incident scene. So, that's how a part of how the incident command system he grew up drew, is that the first person who's there, whether it's a company officer, we even teach our recruits, if you come up on a scene, you're establishing command. So we could have a red shirt, less than 1 year guy, and they come up, they're running supplies for a station, and they come up on a wreck and they get on the radio, they establish command. Now, it's not going to be the same level as a battalion chief, we get that, but we started at the young level, so it grows and becomes natural later on down the road when you have the big incidents. But I know I've got an ego, and I like to brag when we do well, but the tough part is having to brag when you don't do well either. I mean, you have here we go back in the character, and why these 3 wrap up is you got to have the humility. But, Dr. Rick Rigsby, one of the things I share with the recruits when I talk about leadership is I show his video, and it's based on his book, Wisdom of Third Grade Dropout. And he talks about ego as it's the anesthesia that deadens the pain of stupidity. Too much ego is going to lead you to do some stupid stuff. Now there's times you got to make decisions. You got to risk. We can go back into risk a lot, save a lot. And that's that administrative risk, not that incident risk. But, if you think you can do everything because you're assigned to a specific station, only do a specific thing, that ego is going to slap you right in the face and it's going to hurt. And you better be prepared to be humbled. And then the other thing about ego is former sex state Powell, who would be a mentor of mine, not a personal mentor, but he in his leadership primer from years ago, he said, never let your ego get so close to your position that when your position goes, your ego goes with it. So if you don't get that position you want, is that the only path you have? Was that the only thing you were planning to do? You did not have a backup plan? Well, if your ego's hurt, you're going to hurt in that position as well. And those three things bounce around between my ears.
You'd mentioned you have an ego, and I think we all do, obviously, and you should, as you've mentioned, you should have a balance in that ego, right? You should have confidence in your position and your ability within that position and your day-to-day, capabilities, right? You went to EFO, you have 30 years of experience, you were a command chief. Like there's an element of, okay, I know what I'm doing to a degree, right? But doesn't mean I'm not going to listen to you. Doesn't mean I'm going to let my ego get hold of me. But I think that's an important point it's okay to have an ego, but you have to balance that out. Go ahead.
Yeah. If I knew everything, I wouldn't be sitting here. There's stuff I've forgotten. There's stuff you need, you get a question about something and you gotta, you know what? Hey, you're doing it in the street right now. What are we doing? You do have to ask questions. That's again, we come back to the village. Everything's all cyclic when it comes to leadership. Hey, how do you do this? How am I going to do it? You can't be too proud. Have pride in your job, have pride in yourself, but you can't, if you're too proud to ask Airman Snuffy, hey, can you help me with this? Or how do you do this? You're not leading. And then you're not practicing followership either, because the your subject matter expertise does change as you go through your career. There's the task stuff, there's the tactical stuff, there's the strategic. Now I got to have an operating understanding of it, but am I going to be the subject matter expert for, I'm a paramedic. I don't start IVs on a regular basis anymore. Have IV catheters changed? Yeah, they have. So, I'm not doing 100% of my sticks, if you will. But again, if I'm practicing patient care, something else is wrong. We're either super busy or, it just falls. Like I don't carry an ALS bag in my vehicle. So, but that's what it all ties together.
There's one thing that you said too is in regard to the position. I want to say you said Colin Powell. Is that what who you'd brought
yes.
up?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and not tying your identity to a position or the position they potentially could have, or even the position that you have. I love that point. I love when it's brought up. Is there's a story about I want to say Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, something going to a conference and having the luxury treatment, somebody greeting you at the car, greeting you at the door, handing you the cup of coffee, going up for your keynote speech. And I can't remember who had made this, who talked about this, but I want to say it was some kind of Secretary of State. And then he came back the following year. He got his own hotel. He took the taxi to the event, and he asked where the coffee was, and somebody pointed to the coffee, and he drank his cup of coffee out of the styrofoam cup. And he gave a speech at that same event a year later, but because he wasn't in the position he was the year prior, he was treated differently. And
I know the exact story. I just can't figure out who it is.
Your identity to the position that you're in, right? You are not the position that you're in, right? The position is the position. And it's very easy and intoxicating, right? I think fire chief is a great example, or any kind of chief level officer, even company officer in some cases. It's easy to tie your identity to that position, right? But when you're not in that position, it's important to be your own self. I don't know how to best encapsulate that, but I thought that was a great
Oh,
story.
well, I tell this story. I realized this one day. I was a senior master sergeant. It was the Friday before a drill. My promotion date to chief was the following morning. So the first was that Saturday. So I walked in, FSS, there was a line, signed in, did my thing, sat down, got treated and all that. And I remember there was an interaction with somebody at the desk and say, hey, senior, if you just go ahead, sit down, line. The next morning I walk in, my chief stripe is on, and I got moved immediately to the front of the line. And I was like, no. I said, I'm going to sit down with everybody else. And I was like, I was just in here not even 24 hours ago. And because I added a stripe, and I guess that's perks of the position, but I didn't like it. That was difficult. And, I went over to talk to the chief. I said, listen, I appreciate it. And now there are times that stuff has to be escalated or it has to move quicker. I get that, but that should be a conversation with the SCL prior to you walking in and say, hey, can you help me out? And don't do that in front of other people because that hurts. I mean, I don't care who you are. I mean, we had retirees in there getting their ID card and all that, and I got moved to the front of the line. While I appreciate it and I understand it, at the same time, I knew I was going to FSS. I was going to be there for an X amount of time. I accepted that. I accept how our mission worked, but if I need to be expedited, I'm picking up the phone and calling a commander or calling a chief and saying, hey, I need some help here. Can you help me out? And do that on the backside. And, but I'll say this, if you go and ask and they tell the chief, we're stuck, most of the time they're going to make it work, no matter what. But, if they sit there and there's a speed bump, be humble enough, say, okay, let me call you back at a later time. And, I had a good group SCL tell me once, sometimes we need to be better customers. When we come in, when we're doing appointments. I mean, don't get me wrong, everybody's got to do a part, but sometimes we need to be a better customer versus having better customer service.
Great points, Chief. And we talked a bit ahead of this, and I'd ask you, or I'd wrote down, for you to share some of the most impactful, I guess, moments or experiences throughout your career thus far. And I think I shared that with you, correct?
You did. I'm looking at it right now.
Oh, are you? Okay. I don't know if you had an opportunity to think that over. Okay, cool. Yeah, let's get into that. What are some of the most impactful moments for you?
I think seeing airmen and firemen succeed will be the first one, whether I had a role in it or not. I like having roles and seeing people succeed. So a couple stories. When I was acting command chief, the first thing I had to do was remove my first sergeant from my squadron from the position because of something that had gone on off duty. My squad, you couldn't have timed it, make it any better. Went through that process. There was some confusion. I had to get another chief involved because her first the person impacted was, is he talking to me as the fire chief or is he talking to me as the command chief, acting command chief? And so we got another chief involved. Story was, when I came back as command chief, she fixed what she had to fix and graduated from the First Sergeant Academy. So that person had something that had gone wrong, addressed it, fixed it, had some growth period, and we wanted to focus on making sure it just wasn't a one-time mess up. Now, first sergeants, you got to be very careful. We took a risk, or the risk was taken before I came back as command chief. But I made sure I was at her graduation, and we're talking about, and she was an award recipient. And I talked about it. I said, see how far you came. It was about 3 years. And I'm glad we stuck to our guns on that. We just didn't make that one mistake. You have that one mistake and it ends your career, but she succeeded. But got to have a Air Force Reserve Command Senior Airman of the Year from my wing. And, a lot of other people did the writing. I did all the fine tuning at NAF and AFRC level, making sure everything worked and getting the processing right, fine tuning her package to had that was a huge success. Watching them grow. The other thing I'll say, and I was thinking about this morning because I had forgotten about it, is we had a message one day come down. I was fire chief back in 2013, and it was a message from AFCISA asking a support for an EOD class. Normally, pararescue supported it, but they could not, for some reason, budgetary schedule, training schedule, so pararescue couldn't support. Now, this just went out Air Force wide. This wasn't just the reserve. And they needed people that were rope rescue trained in EMT basics to support an EOD class at the Marine Corps Mountain Warfare Center in California. So I picked up the phone, I called the ART, the Air Reserve technician. I said, hey, can we support this? And she said, well, let's try. So, all right. So I put the message out to my assistant chiefs. I said, this is what I need. And I wanted to go myself. I was a medic. I was a rope instructor, but I couldn't because of the civilian job. But I had 3 guys volunteer immediately. We got notified on Sunday. We deployed them that following Saturday, and they were out there for 2 weeks supporting that mission. And it even got to the point we had to bring our own medical gear. Now, as you know, a lot of fire departments, and this was the transition of, hey, we're going away from EMT basics and fire protection. No, we're going to keep them the war between the Surgeon General and the civil engineer and all that. So we went to the med squad. Hey, what do you got for stuff that we can deploy with? Well, my medical squadron was more prepared for mission was prepping people to deploy, go out the door during drills. They weren't really a deploy. They could individually deploy, but they didn't deploy as a squadron. So they had limited stuff. So I said, okay. So I picked up the phone. I called my boss. I said, hey, Chief, this is Pete Webb, Fire Chief from the 919th. I need to talk to you about some mutual aid support. He's like, Pete, what are you talking about? So I explained the whole thing. So he goes, go to logistics, build you a trauma bag, take whatever you need. This is our mutual aid agreement. So I said, okay. So we built. So in 6 days we deployed 3 people. They didn't have anybody get hurt, but they were able to participate in the training and grow it. One the tech sergeant that went, Jimmy Akel, excuse me. He got on the cover doing an Australian rappel at the course, and that was huge. Was just watching them succeed, and there's a lot more stories. There's probably stories I've forgotten of people succeeding, but that's the impactful in a military and a fire department is, maybe get on some structure fires, you get that quick knockdown, you get that quick surge, and you look down, you've only been on scene 8 minutes. That's the stuff you want to see, or you get spontaneous response of respirations back on a code. That's the stuff. Personally, 3 promotions. I'll say when I promoted to staff sergeant, I became a non-commissioned officer. That was really important to me because at that point, it wasn't just mission. It was also taking care of people. We were taking care of people, but when you become an NCO, it becomes very specific to that. Of course, making chief, that was nowhere on my radar when I came out of the Army into the Air Force. I was hoping to make master sergeant, retire. And then command chief, because of all the development that went behind and the stories. I was a chief about 4 months when our command chief was leaving, and he had called me, wanted to know why I hadn't applied. And I'm like, Chief, I said, 1, I'm about to deploy in about 6 months. I've already agreed to that. I need to do that. I said, 2, I've been a chief 4 months. I've got 0 experience right now. But that phone call, that question, why didn't you apply, set me up for the next 6 years because I was happy I was asked. What are you doing talking to him? I was the Jeep chief in the wing. I was the junior chief in the wing, and he asked me to do that. And I'm like, why is he doing that? He's either maybe, thinking I'm crazy enough to put it in, at that point, the village idiot. But it's the small stuff that adds up to the big stuff. And, though my service is all tied to that, those successes.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing those, Chief. And it's funny what's important to you when you're a younger troop versus what's important to you when you're older, a little bit more seasoned, right? And I went through that transition myself, and I love that you brought up that transition into the NCO Corps. And if I were to be asked the same question, I would probably bring that up too. That transition is, I feel like it's it's one of the most important of a career. When you are no longer in charge of yourself, but you're in charge of other people, and people look to you to make decisions and to lead them in the right direction, right? And that happens in the Air Force at the E5 level, and in the fire service. I mean, you're leading people, as engineers and as firefighters, but when you cross that threshold into company officer or station chief, or you're in charge of a station or battalion chief or whatever the case, and you're in charge of people, it's just such a different experience. And I don't think we get paid enough as NCOs in the Air Force, to be honest. It's just such you are, and I think I brought this up in a previous episode, but you are your father figure, uncle figure, brother figure to America's sons and daughters.
Mhm.
You really are. You're getting 18, 19, 20-year-old kids fresh out of high school, maybe a couple years of college. And not only are you leading them in an official professional capacity as a firefighter, as an airman, in the Army as a soldier, the Marine, but you are leading them through life and the complexities of that. Right? How do you buy a car? How do you manage your finances? Hey, I'm having trouble with my landlord, and those different things that you don't even think about. And that all happens when you cross over that threshold.
Mhm.
So it's just such a monumental
And I think it's more important
experience.
today. We're seeing on the civilian side of the house limited life skills. And when I say life skills, when I grew up, we used to cut grass to raise, to get money, or we walked to school, or we had to manipulate public transportation to get to school. You're talking a 10-year-old, 11-year-old kid getting on public transportation to get to the school because the community I grew up only had a couple school buses. And that was budgetary stuff. So they gave you a bus pass and you got on the MBTA, it was outside of Boston. That's how you got to school. I think because we want to take care of our kids as we grow up, we want it better for them.
Mm.
I think we limit some of their life experiences.
It's a more sheltered environment.
And it's tough because I don't want anybody to hurt my child.
Right.
But at the same time, you do lose skills, or you're not exposed to grow those skills. I shouldn't say you lose it because you might not even have them yet. There was a study I read a few months ago talking about land navigation in the Army, and they're finding because of GPS, soldiers have lost some critical thinking when it comes to land navigation because they're relying on their phone or GPS, and it's tougher to teach them now. Which I found interesting that we've just seen a brain evolve over 10, 15 years, if
Think
that.
about AI.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's,
And I don't want to be
now
the old guy in the room, right? I don't want to
yeah.
be the guy that's complaining that the motor vehicle's being made, and I want to stick with my horse. But the critical thinking aspect of that, you're just completely taking away. And what is that going to
And
do to the human experience?
I, you're going to lose some skills. You're going to lose some skills. And, what, if you really want to do a study, you find a neighborhood and you shut down the internet to that neighborhood and see what people do. And you got to do it for days. Hey, my to-do list is on here. My workout plan's on my phone or AI, or, I don't know how to get to so-and-so because I don't have my GPS. It's just, we talk, you talk about when you grow in leadership, hey, don't forget where you came from. Well, where I came from doesn't exist anymore. So, how do you relate to a younger generation with that, with this stuff that you did is not there anymore because we do it totally different. But, AI, it's a challenge as an instructor. Our people, just, you can plug in I've used AI. There's times I've gotten stuck. I said, okay, look, I need some help. Let me
Yeah.
put this through. And
Right.
one of the things we're doing is we're building an officer academy. And, I said, okay, what's ChatGPT going to pull up? I put in my parameters. I put in some areas I wanted to do, and it brought up some accurate stuff, but you got to double check that because that stuff is not 100% correct either. So you still have to you still have to have research skills. I mean, you're going through EFO, and doing all that research and how AI, you have to be careful. It's a good tool. Again, everything's a tool. It's just how much you're going to rely on it, how much you're going to use it.
Yeah, you really have to be disciplined in how you use it, because I'm of the thinking I don't want to lose that critical thinking capability. Like, I want things to be hard to a degree because I know that that's important to my growth, right? And so I've made it a point to not let it write it for me, if that makes sense.
Yep.
What I'll do is I'll write it everything out. I'll do my writing without the aid of any technology other than a word processing document. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
And then I'll run it through the calculator. Like, okay, where am I making mistakes in here? Where am I misspelling? Where is my grammatical grammatical mistakes at? Where am I off in how it sounds? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of how I'll apply it. And we've actually been given instruction, because it's an emerging technology that you just can't keep people from using, and so they've actually created rules. And I think a lot of college institutions do the same thing. I'm sure Columbia Southern has. I like to say, fortunately for me, I did my graduate degree before AI became a thing,
Mhm.
I say fortunately because, and you as well, right? But now you're a doctoral student, because I had to critically think to write everything. There was no really easy button for me. And so, but I think you just have to be disciplined with it now is the way to approach it.
As with any tool, I
I
mean,
love
if we, um, how long? I mean, I've seen it. You've seen some of those stories from Japan. How long before we're throwing robots inside to take care of fires? How long before we have to really consider it because of the cancer risk?
Sure.
Um,
When is it
I
a good
look,
idea? And it might be, you know,
I mean, don't get. I want to be an interior fire. I still want to be an interior firefighter. I always want that. But at one point you get some. At one point, you're gonna have a city manager or mayor say, you know what, we're not doing this anymore because we don't want to pay the bills after the fact. We do that, and that will be huge. But again, another Brunicinism. Um, two things firefighters don't like is change and how the things are currently. So, is there a right tool with it? But the other thing I saw in my career when we started seeing some generational changes is I talked about how bedrooms at fire stations changed through my career. When I first came in, everybody was in an open bay. In fact, my time at Station 1 at Fort Rucker, everything was open bay except for the station captain, the AC on duty. They had their own bedrooms. Actually, no, they didn't. They shared a bedroom, so they were still in there. So then, when I was in the Army in Germany, I would go up to Rhein-Main Air Base when it was still open, and I would train with the Air Force fire guys there, and I'd stay over a shift. We weren't in an open bay. We were in a 3-bedroom division. So you'd have 3 people. So it wasn't everybody in there. 9/11, I get activated to Herbert Field. Of course, my civilian department, we're all open bay. And of course, it's only 3 people. Captain has his own quarters, 3 people in a station, unless a ladder truck's there, and then maybe 7 or 8 at the most. So not that many in a bay. But I get to Herbert Field and everybody has their own room, and everybody's room has TV. So at 4:00, when downtime came along, everybody disappeared. Nobody was in the day room trying to figure out how to watch the one TV channel or what show they were going to watch. Was it going to be The Fight? Was it going to be this movie? And you had to practice your people skills with day-to-day stuff. Well, because we're giving people their own space, not a bad thing, but the dose is the poison. If they're doing it all the time and not learning to be with people outside of work, fire stations are different. You live there. You don't just work there. Is that a foul? I had some captains here in Dothan said, you might not eat the same food of us, but you're going to eat dinner when we eat dinner. You're not going to eat by yourself because
I
that's
like that rule.
and some people did it. Some people, you're going to have your people fight. It's just like paying the coffee
Sure.
fund. Well, I don't drink coffee. I'm not going to pay it. But they would still want to use the ketchup, the mustard, and say, hey, buddy, you got to pay. But that was a people skill. That was how, hey, let me explain it to you. I didn't care. Our coffee fund was $3 a pay period, and it was
right.
Here, let me pay you months. But
you'll always have a guy fight it though.
Yeah, but it's the small things. Those are social skills that we lose with technology.
Well, yeah, our
and that
companions
impacts
are our
us.
phones now,
Oh yeah,
or video games.
yeah. I mean, our recruit school, their phones go in a Tupperware box at the end of the table, and they can't touch it. There's certain breaks the instructors won't even let them touch it.
Yeah,
They'll make
know
them
a lot of
wait till
schools
lunch.
Are doing that. Grade schools.
Yep. Yeah, they just passed a law here in Dothan about that. They used to allow them. Now they don't even want them in the school. You can't even take them to school.
They're such a big distraction.
Yeah.
As helpful as they can be, and as great as they are in connecting to parents in the event of emergency, but they're just such a big distraction. So you can go get them in the event of emergency, but right now, put them away.
Well, we had a tornado actually luckily hit our middle school, 12 months ago. No, less than that. It was last year. And where they kept the phones was impacted. They couldn't get to them right away. So it added to the chaos. But you have parents now that are not used to not having their phones either. That is the only way they communicate. And so it's something we have to adapt to. Don't want to. Honestly, I don't want to adapt to, but there's goodness with it. It's just difficult. I'm an older guy now. I'm getting set in my ways. I am my grandparents, I guess. Now I get it. I get it why they were, but we're also moving a lot quicker than that generation was, though, as far as technology. I mean, it just bounds so quickly.
It sure does. Well, Chief, I want to give you an opportunity to talk about the professional disappointment. So you applied for a job there within Dothan that you've already brought up. We've kind of talked around it a little bit. Tell us about that experience. There was 3 people eligible. You were one of them. You went up. You didn't get the job. Walk us through how you went through the grieving process and what you did following it.
So, yeah, old fire chief was retiring after 19 years. We set it up. So we had to do preliminary questions, write it, do the research, have that turned in. We got that turned in, that gets reviewed. They set up structured interviews. We had 2 visiting fire chiefs, the city manager, personal director, did the interview. We went in there probably about 45 minutes, get in there. A lot of the interview questions tied back to the paper, but some of it didn't. So you had to work that out. So, city manager said, "Hey, I got to go out of town for a week." He said, "I apologize for that, but we'll work it. We'll make it work." Now, again, we had to get to the appointment thing. So when we had city commission meetings, that had to get tied in. So it was about the last week of October, and I have to set the whole stage of what was going on. So, we went back and forth when we'd be notified who got it and whatnot. So we're figuring we still had another week and a half, and they were going to take it to the second commission meeting in November. Well, you know how busy November is, Veterans Day, holidays, and all that. Well, then they realized, hey, we need to do it quicker. So we had our fire prevention luncheon that Thursday, and I had a recruit school going on. So I said, I'll do all the cooking. So I got over there, and I'm just over there cooking burgers. It's really, really cloudy, and we're contemplating whether it's going to rain or not. So flipping burgers, and I get a text from city manager to say, "Hey, can you come by my office discreetly?" I'm like, I said, "I'm flipping burgers. Yes, sir, I'll be there." So, but I couldn't tell anybody. So I'm like, man, I got to get this. So I get all the burgers cooked. We got them in a warming plate. I say, "Hey guys, I got to run back by admin. I'll be back." So I go there, and looking at the time of the day, I kind of felt, I knew walking into his office, I didn't think I had the position. So I get in the position, sit down at the table, and, talk, a little chit chat. And they say, "Hey, I'm moving forward. I've picked David Hasty to be the fire chief." I said, "Okay." He goes, "I know how you feel. I've sat in that table and not gotten a position here in the city before." I said, "Okay." Got it. And I'd also responded to text. I said, "Hey, if I smell like hamburgers when I walk into your office, please understand this." He goes, "Nope, I know what you're doing. I've already found out what you're doing." I said, "Okay, good." So in there, I said, "Okay, well, I confirmed I said, I'll be there for the transition. We'll go through there and all that." He said, "All right." So I left the office. Now, the funny part is when I left the office, the city manager's office is in the commission office there. And we know all the secretarial staff. Well, I'm me. I knew I had to get back for burgers, so I left the office in my normal quick step. A lot of people make fun of me about how I walk, and I move with a purpose at all times. I range walk all the time. Well, the secretary is called the fire department secretary. "Hey, it's Pete, all right?" I mean, he left here quick, and our admin assistant said, "Listen, he's doing stuff." He said, "He'll be all right. He might be upset, but that's his normal walk. Don't worry about that." So I got out to training. Well, as I'm driving back out to training, I called Chief Hasty. I said, "Hey, man, congratulations. Um, when can we communicate? Because my son's in the department, and I have my staff to let know. And you have to, you got to make sure everybody who doesn't get it knows before the message goes out. And it's his message to broadcast." So he said, "Yes, call your son and let him know." So as I'm getting back to training, my son's at training that week. He's taking his aerial operator course. And for some reason, he skipped the lunch, and that's a dad chief thing. But he went to lunch. Funny story. They don't want to participate. But so I called him. I said, "Hey, call me." I said, "Listen, you can't say anything to anybody at the table." I said, "But I did not get the position." And I said, "But I'm not telling you who got the position because it's their job to announce it." He said, "Okay." All right. And then I called my EMS chief who works for me. And I said, "Hey, I gathered my staff around." I said, "I did not get the position." I said, "When it comes out, you'll hear from it. I'll let them do the announcement from there." So we do the burgers. And of course, I didn't have time to mourn because the luncheon included the mayor, the city manager, some of the city commissioners, all the leadership of the department, the guy that didn't get it, me that didn't get it, and the new guy that got it. It hadn't been officially announced yet. So the fire chief comes over to me and talks to me. I'm like, "Yep, I'm good." So you're just doing all that. I was super busy. Well, once that event was done, I called my wife and said, "Hey, I didn't get it." And I told her who got it because she wasn't at work. But at the next event we had our fire explorers were having their family night that night, and we had to do food prep for that. So I didn't go home until about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock that night. And, that's why I told you my wife was mad and all upset and all that, which I still laugh about. So all that. So I didn't get to sit down and think about it till about 8 o'clock that night. So it had been about 10 hours or so. And I was like, all right, so now disappointed. I let some of my my fellow peers, I've got a group of retired command chiefs I hang out with. I'd let them know they knew I was applying, so I didn't get it. And I General Merrill, who's the guy I used to one of the commanders I worked for, I'd let him know because he was curious about it. And I did that, and it still wasn't public yet. The old fire chief's trying to get the city manager to put it out because if it's starting to run like telephone, telegraph, firefighter if you don't get the message out quick. So they got the message out. It became official, and so went through that for a day, and went in, had a face-to-face, and he said, listen, and Chief Hasty is a retired Chief Master Sergeant as well, out of the Florida Guard. So the conversation really wasn't a fire chief and a deputy chief, he was selected. He was not voted on yet. So we had to actually wait for that to happen. But it was a chief to chief conversation, because, in the military, you're going to have chiefs that get positions that you don't. So I think that the transition with that was easier because not only was he a brother firefighter, he was a brother chief master sergeant too. And we've helped each other through our careers. I mean, he helped me get through senior NCO course when I struggled years ago as well. So, but, so getting through that, you do have the people. The toughest part, I think, is when the people come up to you and say, hey man, you would have been our selection for fire chief. And you accept that, but at the same time, you got to be like, well, please understand the decision that was made was that the city manager said the person he felt best to work with for the future of the city of Dothan was Chief Hasty. So, and that was point blank. How can you argue that? Because it is, as we talked about the likability, we talked about the trust. That's what he felt was best. Got it. If you want to sit down and compare resumes, and we touched upon this, I meant to follow up on this, talk about resumes. I will say I had a stronger resume. However, the resume only gets you a ticket into the interview. Now you got to sell your likability. Now you got to sell your trust. How do you articulate? I mean, I use the word you've heard it a lot. Maybe I'm not that good of a presenter. I just said it again. Now I'm going to count it. But so it came down to that. I got the ticket into the door. It's my job to sell it. But what was the city manager looking for? And so that all that came in there. So, and, I will say with Chief Hasty, I probably, before the interviews, before the selection, we talked a lot about where the department needs to go in the future. We knew 26 was, so we had a lot of like ideas, and interesting that we each had to pick an incident that went wrong and we had to talk about, and we spoke about the same incident. We didn't talk about that prior to, but in the interview, it came out. And January 7th, 2013, we lost 2 kids in a fire. But we both talked about what we had learned from that incident, all the stuff that went wrong in that incident. But so the next thing I did, talk through, hey, I didn't get it, move through it. I went into a normal job opportunity. The mission still has to go on. We still got to respond to fires. I was still building a training plan for 2026, trying to get all that through. And so I called them my spitballs, all my notes I gave up the game. I said, this is what I was thinking if I made fire chief. Let's share the information, because I'm not going to hoard anything, so I don't want to hurt it. And, that's where we're at. So, and then the other thing I did is, then we had to retire the fire chief, and then we had to do the badge pinning, which we just did a couple weeks ago. And I emceed the badge pinning and the swearing in ceremony for him. And what I did is I just threw myself at it. And it wasn't, it still stings. You sit there on the side and you want to be at that podium saying thank you to everybody for selecting me and having, but you're not. So you just go in there, and I just concentrated on the work, and maybe that was too much. Maybe that was workaholic-ish in hindsight. I'm not sure. But the job was making sure that we were still there for Mrs. Smith, making sure we were there for firefighter Snuffy, and then going from there. And it was, I did think through the character, the integrity, and the follow-up. And that's when I reached out to you. A part of me was, all right, how do I don't want to say heal, but how do I grow from this? And sometimes you're not always going to get the positions you apply for. If you do, and you go through life and you get every single thing, how much learning are you doing? We learn from mistakes. I don't want to say this to me, this is not a failure. It's just, I didn't succeed. I mean, I think there's a difference. I can run around, oh, I failed. Now I'm poor mouthing myself. We can build the environment we live in, we grow from. So, go from there. And it's, honestly, I was given position of choice. I could move to operations as a deputy, or I could stay in training. And I said, I got to go home and think about it. So it's, it's not kissing tail. It's following through, but being true to yourself, being true to your family, and you go from there. And then, what's the next opportunity? And silly me, I decided, I'm just going to go have to get my doctorate degree. Yeah, sure. I mean, that's,
See, you have a lot of next step.
yeah. But that's what went through my mind. And I said, we do a lot about, hey, how do you succeed? How do you succeed? Well, how do you come out of not getting what you want?
Mm.
And, you come back to character, integrity, fellowship, and all of the things. So it was like, I was so busy that day, I didn't get a lot of time to think about it. And I was thrown right into the thick of the mess with the mayor being there and, on that whole event. And, I didn't want to create a bad environment. So,
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Chief, and I appreciate the candor, because I can sense that you're still kind of going through that process. And I think that, that there's a element of realism there that I think it's important for people to understand, that it's going to hurt. It's going to be painful. This is something you care about a lot. This is something that you wanted. This is something that you would have been great at, that you have the resume for, and it didn't work out. And
yeah.
that's going to happen to all of us, that things aren't always going to work out for us.
Yeah, I did. And it comes back to ego. I did not need the position to be successful in my career.
Sure.
I wanted it, but I didn't need it. So I think I had enough of that detachment, if you will, that me not being fire chief ruins my whole career, everything I did in the Dothan Fire Department. I mean, I'm a retired fire chief. I've got, so the part that helps is my military service. I achieved that rank of being a fire chief. I just didn't get it at Dothan. So that makes it easier for me to come out of it as well. I got to achieve it. Other people might not have had that opportunity like I did.
I think a key point here in your story is that when this failure, when you were faced with, I don't want to call it a failure, let's call it failing forward. I love to use that term. Is like
I'll take
failures
that.
really help you maybe more than successes do in some cases, because you just learn so much through that adversity and through that tough circumstance. But through that experience, your aim and your focus went towards what was important to the mission, to the community, and not so much yourself, right? You still had to be there for the firefighters and for the cadets in the academy and for the community, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. And I think that's probably one of the more important elements to take out of this, is that that's where your focus went. And so that it's important to not be so invested in yourself and as an individual and your ego but actually focus on your responsibility in the position that you're in.
It comes back to service before self. I mean, it's weird how your core values keep popping up in your life. I mean, it's kind of funny, because as younger airmen, younger soldiers,
buzzwords and
they are, but
the word itself doesn't carry meaning. It's everything behind the word, the integrity and service before self. And what does that actually mean? Like, let's go deeper than the surface.
And it's different for everybody.
And it's
there's the diversity that comes into play. You're going to receive it differently. You're going to share it differently.
Sure.
And it comes back to the dose versus the poison. I could very well go too far too, and not worry about myself or my family and take it too far. So we're coming back to that work balance life, and all of this stuff does tie in together, and I call it stuff, but it's leadership, whether it's the verb or the noun. It's your core values. It's your focus and all that. It comes back and it works. I'll explain it.
There's so many complexities to it, Chief. It's a lifelong learning process, as you shared. So, well, we appreciate you sharing that story, sharing your lessons learned through your leadership journey. Best of luck to you in the future. I mean, I imagine that, I don't know how long you have, what your plans are in terms of your career, but maybe we'll have you on 4 years from now and we'll be talking about how you got the fire chief position. You never know.
You never know. No, it's kind of funny. I'd like to retire next April 1, 27, not 26, because I want to retire on April Fool's Day. I don't, that's the jokester in me. But it depends what happens. Stuff can change really quick. But I think 27 is my year. I'll have 30 years with the department. With the way our pension system works, I'll have 40 years invested in the pension because I was able to buy back some active duty time, hazard duty time. So, financially, that might be the smartest thing for me to do and just kick back and teach. And if my doctoral plan works the way I want to, retiring 27 helps me focus on writing my dissertation, finishing my dissertation. And that probably needs to be a full-time process, not just a part-time process.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I got a grandson, raising up. And then, I also feel I need to get out of my son's way. Dothan Fire Department needs to turn into his fire department, not our fire department. I like the years I've got with them. I contemplated retiring earlier once he got the job. We had to do some finagling. The only time he's ever reported to me is when he was in the academy. But we had a plan that say, hey, if anything pops up positive and or negative, it's got to go to the ops chief. That's now Chief Hasty, the fire chief. So we worked all that out, clarified. Fortunately, didn't have to do anything great with that. But I said earlier, the dad and chief thing, there's times I'm dad, there's times I have to be chief as well. And, when I start seeing stuff that's overdue, when I'm pulling up the databases, it's like, God dang it. I said, get into this program now. It's coming.
Tough being the chief, the son of a deputy chief in the department.
But we have a lot of legacy in our department. I know.
That's awesome.
So my son Spencer hit two of his closest buds. Their dad worked with me. We worked in the same company. Cool. I learned a lot from him. He's a fantastic medic. He's still medicing, but so we got quite a few, and so Chief Hasty's dad, he was a captain of the department when I hired in. So, he got some time to serve with his dad as well. Of course, we've never been we don't put him in the same company, although it can happen if you get into a disaster situation. My son could be working directly for me based on that or working through all that. But that becomes a challenge when you're trying to balance people across 6 battalions and all that. But you don't really normally run into that in the Air Force. Of course, it's a bigger fire department, if you include everything. But
well, Chief, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing that story. Thank you for your decades of service.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an absolute pleasure. Love to pick your brain. And again, listeners, if you haven't listened to episode 35, go back and listen to that. He tells another great story that's worth listening to. Thank you for your time, Chief. Do you have anything else before we close it up?
Hey, thank you for what you do with this program. Thank you for sharing the stuff. And I say stuff, I mean the leadership stories, the talking about fireground stuff, the coffee table discussions and all that. It's a really good program. If none of you have ever had an opportunity, you got a story to tell, reach out to Matt. And get it out there. I mean, he's got a scheduling program. It's pretty awesome. I didn't realize it was that much because last time it was it was a little bit different.
Technology.
Yeah, hey, it works. But listen, get out there, study, read. That's another skill we lose. Reading's super critical for development. But no, thank you for this. Keep doing this. This is a great thing. Getting all styles of fire protection, whether it's active duty, reserve, or you just pull them from the civilian, all the stories that tell, that's what tells our history and that's what grows. And, if you haven't checked as a firefighter, if you haven't checked your smoke alarm, check it, because we often sit there and tell other people to check it, but we forget to check it ourselves. And I mean that in seriousness.
I got you.
So all that, but thank you.
That's a great plug there at the end. I appreciate your time, Chief. Have a good one.
All right. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the FireDawg Podcast. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to rate and review the show on your podcast platform of choice. It's one of the best ways to help us reach more firefighters and leaders across the fire service. This episode was supported by Roll Call Coins, telling the story of fire departments and teams through premium custom challenge coins. Learn more at rollcallcoins.com. It was also supported by AOS Services, helping fire departments stay mission ready with worldwide firefighting equipment compliance. Find out more at aosservicesinc.com. You can also find more episodes at firedawg.us or wherever you listen to podcasts. And be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at the FireDawg Podcast. That is the FireDawg Podcast. Sharing this episode with a friend, coworker, or someone in your firehouse helps these conversations reach the people who would benefit most. This is Matt Wilson with guest Pete Webb. Until next time, stay safe.